Thank you very much, Michael. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Appreciate it. And as Michael talked about it during his introductory comments, he was really on point relative to the purpose of the presentation. And it strikes a chord with me because, as referenced in my biography, I've been through different parts of the country as a city manager: Florida, New Mexico, West Virginia, now here in metropolitan Atlanta for about 3.5 years. And the type of presentation being provided this morning is an abbreviated civics lesson I've actually provided at universities, different engagements, other groups, etc., throughout the career for the very reasons that Michael talked about. And that is, oftentimes when the question comes up, well, Terrence, what is a city manager? There was an ICMA presentation at the International City County Management Association annual conference a number of years ago. What the blank is a city manager? And I was actually a panelist for this particular discussion, and interestingly enough, I took that and decided to make it available to different community groups, guest lecturers at universities, different parts of the country in which I've been involved in. So a couple of my previous city manager positions have been in university communities. And interestingly enough, with the level of engagement, the students and everybody involved in that level of activity, a lot of those types of questions came about. So given what Michael and I talked about a few months ago, we decided, okay, well, we can offer an abbreviated presentation in terms of what the role and function of the city manager is. Thus the title of this presentation, The Role and Function of Professional Management and Leadership in Local Government. And that's really to clarify the principal role and function of the city manager, different forms of government structures, etc. Now I do recognize that a number of people in the room, Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr., for example, Maceo Rogers, Artie, Gerald Walker, the handsome gentleman with the camera and the video camera activity, are pretty well familiar with the role and function of the city manager, local government, etc. However, again, every community in which I've been involved in, and I would introduce myself, frequently I'm hit with the question, well, what does that mean, Terrence? They have a lot of different thoughts. Okay, are you a department director? Are you assistant to the mayor? Exactly what that is. And much of this goes in hand with what is taught at the elementary school level, at the high school level. You learn about different levels of government. Remember being back in school. When you hear about a city, you think about the mayor. You hear about state government, you think about the governor. You hear about the federal government, you think of Congress, Senate, and the president, of course. But you think about county government, you think about school superintendency appointments and that. Their role and function of being the chief administrative officer or chief executive officer oftentimes comes into play, and frequently those types of clarifications, background, and education does not come about until one gets involved into it in undergraduate school or graduate school, if one has an interest in business, political science, economics, public administration, public policy, etc. So to a lot of people who are successful and had the opportunity to achieve and make accomplishments, this may not have come across their radar screen or part of their academic training, and oftentimes that is the case, and therefore I've decided to do as much as I possibly can to contribute knowledge and background so that people are familiar with the role and function, number one. Number two, the more that happens, the easier my life is in terms of explaining to people what the hell it is that I do for a living. So, council manager format analogous to the private sector firm. So oftentimes, once I share with people, and Michael talked about in his introductory comments, the role and function of the city manager, chief executive officer, or chief administrative officer, really depending on how the city charter is worded, to that effect that defines the city manager. So a city charter, of course, is the Bible, if you will, referencing the scope and purpose of the local governmental entity. So there's a definition for city manager and the council manager form system, and I'll talk about that momentarily. There's the mayor, the definition of that power, duties, and responsibilities, also those of the elected official city council members. So a typical city charter would be worded in that fashion. So it really comes to mind three popular forms of local government structure in the United States and other industrialized nations around the world: strong mayor form, commission form, council manager plan. So strong mayor form of government, we think about some of your traditional larger cities, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, in which the mayor is not only elected to serve as the chief elected official, but also functions as the chief executive officer, and the city charter in those respective communities are actually worded that way. So a number of cities operate in that regard. However, the most popular form of government throughout the United States and industrialized countries around the world is the council manager plan, and I'll discuss for you all a little while later why. Before addressing that, there is another far less popular form of government called the commission form. And essentially the way it works is like this. Individual people are elected to be commissioners. A small community may have 5 commissioners elected, and each of those elected officials are over certain departments. It's an old, outdated, antiquated approach, but a few cities throughout the United States still function in that regard. And it's really, really interesting. And the cities that transition from that form of government have adopted which form of government? The council manager plan. And that's the most popular, fastest growing throughout the country since throughout much of the 20th century. And I'll discuss that history momentarily. Council manager format analogous to the private sector firm. So in essence, mayor and city council, think of it this way. Many of you all have been in business. Many of you have studied business, undergraduate, graduate school, whatever the case may be, and you learn about different business models, different organizational leadership structures. Think about the mayor and city council essentially as your board of directors for the corporation. The municipality, the city, is a corporation, technically defined as a municipal corporation in many circles by virtue of its charter. And therefore, the mayor and city council are essentially elected by the people, the stakeholders of the company being the city, to serve as its board of directors. They in turn appoint a well-trained, well-educated, in theory, person to lead day-to-day operations in the capacity of chief executive officer or chief administrative officer, known as what?
City manager.
City manager, that's exactly right. So in essence, responsible for day-to-day activities, leadership and direction to all departments and employees, budget, financing, and other proposals necessary to move communities forward. That's a big scope of the operation, much that of a private sector chief executive officer. That is essentially how this all came about. Other public sector entities that have adopted similar organizational structures include public school districts via the appointment of a school superintendent. You have a school board who's elected, a chairman of the school board, and they in turn appoint and hire, recruit well-trained, well-educated people to be considered for the superintendency position. County governments, Marvin Arrington, you sir, you've had the opportunity to appoint county managers for the very same reason. You all serve as the Board of County Commissioners, essentially the Board of Directors for Fulton County. You in turn appoint a well-trained, well-educated individual to run day-to-day operations with relevant background based on the needs and scope of the operation across the board. So interestingly enough, that does work out quite well. How did this all come about? So the movement began quite some time ago. I have a pretty interesting story as to how my interest in city management came about, believe it or not, back in high school. Yes, I was one of those people who, as a kid, knew what it is that I had an interest in doing, and a lot of people, quite frankly, did not get it. It was quite a lonely existence because growing up in inner city Chicago, one of these strong mayor cities, people don't know what the hell a city manager is. Terrence, what are you talking about? My poor old grandmother who I was raised by. I don't know what you're trying to do, Terrence. But once she figured it out and I made it to that place, she was one of these people who would go to church every Sunday with the news clippings. My grandson got this appointment, blah, 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 blah. So once she figured out what it was, it became more meaningful. So I like to tease her about that from time to time. So in any event, the genesis behind the council manager form of government actually came about in the late 19th century. Some of you who may have studied political science, economics, any of those courses back in undergraduate school may have heard of Tammany Hall politics. Anybody recall from reading history, New York City, Tammany Hall politics? So a reform movement, a fairly quiet yet effective reform movement came about to encourage a different type of model for local governments, particularly as the vision at the time was that the United States of America was becoming a more urbanized, more sophisticated environment. So making a transition from a rural bucolic society to a more urbanized society meant the need and appreciation for a solid, capable leadership and something that could be trusted, as opposed to popularity context, as opposed to a lack of checks and balances, if you will. So finally, in the year of 1908, the city of Staunton, Virginia, became the first city in the United States of America to adopt the council manager form of government. So as the birthplace of the council manager plan, the appointment of the first city manager occurred in this particular jurisdiction. The second city occurred in 1912, Sumter, South Carolina. And from there, 2 years later, the first large city in America to have adopted the council manager plan was Dayton, Ohio. Again, 1914, 102 years ago, Dayton was regarded as a large city at the time because, again, America was transitioning into a larger, more urbanized environment across the board. Since the 1920s, however, with the nationwide incorporation of municipalities, the council manager form of government became the preferred and most popular form of municipal government. Thus, the proliferation of public administration programs since then, specialties in city management, public policy, public finance, etc. In academia, those programs have evolved and become more competitive in terms of training people to provide the necessary background and education in order to go forward in that regard. I talked a little bit jovially about New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, some of the big cities throughout America that still employ the strong mayor system due to the political nature of those environments and landscapes. There are a number of large cities that also employ the council manager form of government. The listing before you: Dallas, Texas; Austin, Texas; San Antonio, Texas; San Jose, California; Cincinnati, Ohio; Phoenix, Arizona; Miami, Florida. Believe it or not, all have city managers at the helm. So most cities that are smaller to medium sized than that, like some of the areas around metropolitan Atlanta, the communities around Atlanta pretty much all employ the council manager form of government system for the reasons I've just talked about and discussed. But a number of large cities have moved in that direction as well because they've seen the benefits and demonstrated how something like that can work based on the private sector model via the board of directors appointing a chief executive to provide day-to-day service and operations across the board. I will say that, as many of you all know who've had any experiences and observations to this effect, the city management profession can be quite rewarding and, in many cases, quite tenuous. Because, of course, we do serve at the will of mayor and city council. Oftentimes, political will may take over relative to the type of appointment or capacity one may lead or follow. Oftentimes, a transition or a change in direction comes about. Likewise, there are a lot of jokes about that in the industry as to how council manager form of government works, how city managers are able to survive. You think about my professional biography a little bit. I've been in different parts of the country. So I've been a city manager 4 times. College Park is my 4th city management appointment. So I've been a city manager altogether now for coming up on 18 years. Do not let the baby face fool you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting to be an old man. A youthful one, though. So in any event, been in Florida, New Mexico, West Virginia, now here at College Park in metropolitan Atlanta. So a lot of diverse experiences across the board. A principal reason for that, much like a school superintendent or even a county manager, Commissioner Arrington, is that it's an itinerant profession. So whenever I have the opportunity to share with young people, advise folks as to their interests and abilities to get involved in such a profession, rule number 1 is that you will be an itinerant. Some city managers have been able to achieve success by remaining in one section of the country, one section of a particular state, whatever the case may be, and fortunate in getting those opportunities. However, the traditional career city manager is one who is an itinerant and therefore has to be made available in different parts of the country to serve. Because oftentimes what a mayor and city council is looking for is that fit. Not only the professional camaraderie associated with being able to connect and deal with them. Again, County Manager, Fulton County, County Commissioner Marvin Arrington, you've had these experiences along the way. I'm sorry, my man, I keep picking on you a little bit, but you're a good example. What can I say? Thank you. All complimentary, I assure you, in front of all these people. So in any event, that has to be the case in addition to having the X's and O's background to offer technical leadership and guidance. Because a good role and function of a chief executive officer is to be not only responsible for day-to-day operations, leadership, and guidance, but to be the trusted advisor. Right, Commissioner Everington? Right. To be the trusted advisor to the elected board of directors so as to be effective across the board. And the running joke I like to always employ, okay, Terrence, you're doing a good job. People are complimentary in that regard. And my response is typically this: well, I'm only as good as my last city council meeting. So we have to continuously work at it and stay on top of it and be on the ball. With that, ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of time, I decided to keep it short, fairly abbreviated, but I will entertain any specific questions if time permits. Oh, come on. We had a little laughter and a little serious discussion and everything. Come on with it. Artie Jones. You worked with me, so you are compelled to do so.
Why did you come to Atlanta versus other places around the country to become a city manager?
Very good question. So, personally and professionally, it was desirable. So, first of all, a lot of the issues and challenges associated with Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the 3 previous city manager experiences I've had were a lot of aviation issues, although on a general aviation basis, there was a lot of knowledge and background developed as a result of that. So when the Mercer Group, the search firm representing the city of College Park, was pursuing candidates for different opportunities, they had a certain criteria in mind. So initially, the thinking on part of Mayor and City Council was a person with these traits, this background, some knowledge in aviation affairs, issues, etc. Knowledge and background relative to finance, public finance, acumen, leadership, building fund balances, growing that, so on and so forth. So a lot of intimate and general details and background. So the Mercer Group, their job is to identify people with that type of background and experience, as you might know from being recruited by a similar firm not long after I got here. So in any event, it's a little bit more intimate in terms of dealing with city managers, county managers, and school superintendents. They really delve into the weeds relative to one's background. So my interest was to someday get involved in a major urban community. So in the case of College Park, looking at the metrics, the small daytime population, looking at what it all offers in terms of scope and function of the city, a lot of that wasn't clearly evident. So the idea to come to metropolitan Atlanta was intriguing by both me and my wife. Again, the thinking was to someday get to a place like that. And delving into College Park, doing the research in that, I learned more about Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Much of it is in the corporate limits of College Park, as everybody realizes and attests. The Georgia International Convention Center, having some background and experiences along those lines. And I said, well, given the scope and function of the community as a whole, I said, well, this might be worth a look. Let's check it out. And so it was very productive. And quite frankly, while in the finalist interview with Mayor and City Council, it was determined to be a fit right away. So my interview with Mayor and City Council took place on January 15, 2013. There in the evening, they anticipated talking to me for about an hour or so. I'm a pretty loquacious guy, so we ended up talking for about 2 hours. And they were pretty excited. And funny thing is, the very next morning, 8 o'clock, I'm in the hotel room, still asleep. Ring my cell phone. It was Mayor Longino. Terrence, you're the guy. Pretty much that's how it went. And looking at the metrics, looking at the opportunities, the scope of the operation in that, it made sense for me professionally. Personally, the idea to be involved in metropolitan Atlanta, we try to enjoy that. Lisa was not a big fan of Morgantown, West Virginia. Lisa's my wife, by the way. She and I got married in 2011. So the first couple of years of marriage, that's where we were. And I liked it okay because of the university experience and background and all came with that. Did that in Las Cruces, New Mexico with New Mexico State. But I will say to you, ladies and gentlemen, it is a big damn difference in terms of the tertiary market communities and the major urban communities. In terms of mindset, professionalism, my experience, not to be discourteous or disrespectful to any community, I'm really thankful for all the opportunities I've had. But it does make a difference, and therefore, in terms of vitality and being able to perform and achieve and accomplish, more enthusiasm and balance. Artie, that's a loaded question. I can go on for hours and hours about it. You give me a call at the office when we get back. Not really. Mike Simpson, then Maceo, then Michael. Please.
Number one, what is your greatest success? Number two, what do you want to accomplish? And number three, we can just wait. If you do something really bad, we'll just watch it on channel 2. But just go ahead.
Because they're always looking. Even if it's not real, they're always looking. That's exactly right. So as far as any greatest successes, a lot of accomplishments had been achieved throughout the career. I'm very proud of that. But quite frankly, being able to become a city manager when I was able to become a city manager, again, quite young, still in my 20s, able to proceed in that regard. And given the diverse experiences I've had, a little bit dangerous. A footnote about me. In New Mexico, West Virginia, I'm actually the first African-American city manager in each of those states. And that was not at all by design. I was simply pursuing my professional interests. making contributions for the same reason I talked about as to why College Park came about, because of a fit, background, experience, meshes with the needs of the organization, et cetera. And I'm actually thankful for that, although it was never by design. Again, the focus was to pursue one's professional interest, do the absolute best one can, and take it from there. So nothing specifically jumps out, but more or less my being thankful for the opportunities I've had, and quite frankly, where I go from here. Right now, the principal focus is on College Park. I'm glad to see that Artie is coming back here during your October 27th meeting to talk a little bit about economic development synergy, and that you've all heard from Mayor Longino a few months ago, as I understand it, and he speaks really enthusiastically about what's all happening in College Park and what we're involved in. So right now, that's the principal focus, but throughout my professional career, I remain committed and devoted to the city management profession. I think I'm pretty decent at it. At least I like to think so anyway. At least I am in my own mind. I don't know. But I'm encouraged to continue moving forward in that regard. So thank you. Let's see, Maceo.
Yes, quickly, how does the fact that you work around, of course, the country right now, how does the city of College Park compare or differ from the cities you work with?
The only comparables are the contributions I've been able to make, Sebastian, Florida, Las Cruces, New Mexico, Morgantown, West Virginia, in terms of financial policy, public budgeting and evaluation strategies and techniques, the ability to grow general fund, austerity measures, those types of approaches. Applying that to College Park in terms of advancing that going forward. That's really important because, as the mayor probably talked about, he always talks about how financially healthy the city of College Park is because it has a diversity of funds. Kind of like East Point, you're a MEAC community, like College Park, MEAC standing for the Municipal Electric Authority of Georgia, and therefore we own and operate electrical distribution utilities, in addition to water, sewer, wastewater, et cetera. So given the mix of utilities, enterprise fund operations, and that financial savvy and background is really applicable in that regard, and some of my experiences included as city manager in a community with a natural gas utility. A lot of common interests and similarities in that regard. But the biggest difference, of course, is the environment, as I talked about. College Park joined at the hip with Atlanta, with the airport and everything else going on, and therefore that urban experience and environment. And quite frankly, many people think, well, Terrence, you were born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. Atlanta must be small in comparison. Yes, it is, but given all the other places I have been involved in, they're tertiary market communities. So I consider coming into a primary market community like College Park, part of metropolitan Atlanta, inner suburban metropolitan Atlanta, inside the perimeter of the airport, et cetera, a nice accomplishment. So for that reason, a running joke I have, and I'm somewhat serious, is this. Terrence, I say to myself, I hope and I pray that I never find myself professionally involved in a tertiary market community again. The primary major urban communities are where it's at. My experiences, ladies and gentlemen, speaking openly and candidly about it, which I'm comfortable in doing. So again, one of those questions in which one can go on for hours about, but I will not. Michael.
What are your top accomplishments when you were watching as city manager in College Park?
Oh, where's continuous process? Quite frankly, what I'm really proud of is the financial piece. The city of College Park, during the economic downturn, of course, had to tap its fund balance to issue services, provide services, finance services, and that. And so we have a fund balance of nearly $100 million right now. As noted in the biography, our total fund budget operation is about $110 million. It's noted as $115 million. It's actually gone down. So we've actually reduced our total fund budget operation without cutting services. In fact, we've creatively been able to expand in certain areas in that, achieving efficiencies in operations and so on. But of course, much of the good work is underway right now. Another nice accomplishment is a settlement involving the city of Atlanta. The 1969 settlement agreement, upon my coming on board in early 2013, that was starting to take off and get to that place, and it was finally done, resulting in millions of dollars to the city of College Park, essentially from back taxes that are due to the city. So that's a nice accomplishment because that helps us in our financial bottom line without adversely impacting services or provisions across the board. So the thing about the city management profession as it is in College Park, there's no such thing as one specific accomplishment. Typically, there are multiple accomplishments because of the breadth of experience and background being as diverse that it is. So I'm still getting my arms around, okay, what are the accomplishments we've been able to make? But there's some news that will be upcoming, and I'll give Artie the opportunity to share that with you in October. The timing is impeccable given what it is we're involved in, because we'll likely have some announcements with respect to that. Otherwise, Michael, ladies and gentlemen, I continue to have a good time both personally and professionally, and therefore I ain't mad at nobody.
One more question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Brown.
Any thought about returning home?
Absolutely not. Born and raised in Chicago, and what Mr. Brown is talking about is that a lot of people like Chicago. Pretty gritty, rough environment where I grew up. And I left Chicago for good after finishing the first graduate program, after getting the MPA degree out of Chicago. And all the opportunities and interests, did really well in school and all that, they came from other parts of the country. They came nationally. I'm just like, okay, well, it's a city management profession as an itinerant one at 23 years old. I need to get used to it right now. I say that because the different experiences I've had and contributions I've been able to make in different parts of the country have been wonderful in many respects. A lot of nonsense, a lot of inconveniences, a lot of issues and challenges along the way do not take away from the accomplishments and achievements having been made as a result. The United States is a great place, a lot of great opportunities in which to contribute, and therefore that's what I've been able to discover. When the announcement was made, Mr. Brown, that I would be coming to Atlanta here in College Park to be a city manager back in January 2013, people from Chicago and all over the country were excited. Terrence, I need to come see you. People want to come see you now. People want to come check it out and visit because of the Atlanta connection and all that. Not so much the case in Morgantown, West Virginia, Las Cruces, New Mexico, or Sebastian, Florida even. So on that note, I need to stick with it. I go home to visit, say hey, couple days, come back home. Home is where you're at, and that's College Park, Georgia.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.